Hi, everyone. My name is Devin. I work at the Worcester Public Library, and today I'm here with author Grace Talusan. Thanks so much for being here with us, Grace.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. Uh, Grace is the author of the memoir, The Body Papers. It was the winner of the 2020 Massachusetts Book Award in nonfiction, the Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing, it also received. It was a New York Times Editor's Choice selection as well. She was born in the Philippines and raised in New England. She graduated from Tufts University and the MFA program in writing at UC Irvine. She is the recipient of a U.S. Fulbright Fellowship to the Philippines and an Artist Fellowship Award from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. She taught writing for many years at Tufts University and Grub Street. Currently, she is the Fannie Hurst Writer in Residence at Brandeis University. Well, you have quite a wealth of experience, so I have a lot of questions for you. But first, an easy one.
Okay.
I read that a neighbor brought you to the public library when you were in first grade, and that having access to all those books led you to being the writer that you are today. So I'm curious if you could tell us about your experiences using the library then, and what kind of books were you first drawn to?
Yeah, thank you. The discovery of the public library in my town was like changed my life. My parents grew up in the Philippines and they didn't have access to public libraries. There are a lot of private libraries, and even with those, you can't take the books home. It's the kind of situation where you sit and look at the book in the space. So they never did that kind of thing. And so books were pretty out of reach for them, and they didn't buy us many books. It would be like a really special thing for them to buy me a book. So for the neighbor to discover that I liked reading and to specifically take me to the library so that I could take out as many books as I wanted was a total game changer. I think there was a point where I think they'd limited it to 10 children's books, but then there was a certain point where the librarian knew me and she really let me take out as many books as I wanted. And there's a sense of freedom there, to be able to do that. And it did directly impact my growth as a writer because I could read as much as I wanted and I would finish shelves. So there's something wonderful about being able to physically go to the shelf and see, here's all of Judy Blume's books, and to start at the earliest ones and then make my way through a shelf. And I would complete like the author because I would love that book so much, that one book, that I want to be in the world of that author for as long as possible. And so people like Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume, Madeleine L'Engle, I really was drawn to women writers at the time and stories about women and girls. I remember wanting to read about Helen Keller and Florence Nightingale and other like heroic women, American women. And then I wanted to read about fictional girls and women like Amelia Bedelia by Peggy Parrish when I was younger, and then Ramona Quimby as I got a little bit older as a kid. And then it was, all the YA young adult books and then the adult section. And so it was freedom to be able to use a public library.
Well, that sounds like a really great experience. And I read a lot of Judy Blume back in the day too.
Yeah.
So, about your memoir, I was so surprised to see Celeste Ng as one of the big commentators on this. She said your memoir is written eloquently and you say unsayable things, that it's equal parts compassion and confession, and that it transcends the personal to speak on a universal level. So I did, I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but I flipped through quite a lot and I read a lot about it. And there are a lot of painful memories and painful things like in present day as well. So I was wondering, how difficult was it emotionally for you to write this, and how did you sort of work through and past that?
Thank you. Well, I was really lucky that Celeste offered, an endorsement or something to say about the book. And it's really an honor for me to see how people receive my book and what they say about it. Because, of course, I had this experience of writing it. And then it's wonderful to have the other part of the experience is what did readers say? And, I love having what she thought about it and felt about the book on the book itself. And then I get notes probably every day from other readers who've connected with the work. And even though some of the material is emotionally difficult for me to have lived through, I do think that, all of us experience emotionally difficult things to various degrees. And, and in the way that, and I sort of knew that as I was revising the book, I'd have to take care of myself. And because I'd been, writing and alive for so long, I sort of had a sense of how I needed to take care of myself. And I knew that when I was doing like deep revisions for the book, I I know what I need to take care of myself, which is like spending time with people I love, exercising, talking to friends, having different supports in place, like my writing group, different configurations of like women's writing groups that I'm in. And, I had to think about all the kinds of carrots that would help me, um, you know, be motivated to get to the end of a process. Because I just, every time I dove into work on the material, it was emotionally challenging for me. Um, but I thought about the reader a lot. Like I've read probably hundreds of memoirs very directly about trauma. And I thought about my experience as a reader, and I wanted to give my reader of this book a different sort of experience and not, um, you know, like have them know what I went through and feel some sense of it, but not actually have them relive my memories. So I was very deliberate about why and what I did in terms of the scenes in the work.
That makes sense. One thing I like a lot about your memoir, and maybe this is what you're referring to, in making it interesting for your readers, you included photographs, you included copies of important papers like medical records and immigration papers. There's even a note from your, first day at school from your classmates. So I just want to show just a couple to give people an example. Um, Here's passport image. And then I loved all the photos. You even put your senior photo in there from high school, which I bet a lot of people would think is pretty brave. I know I wouldn't do it. Here's a bunch of family photos, and your family photos really span over time too, from when you're young and as you're growing up and interacting with your niece and stuff like that. So, what inspired you? You see a lot of bios and memoirs, and there's maybe a few photos in the middle, but this really has a lot. So, what inspired you to do that?
I mean, it was initially my friend Joanne Diaz's idea to use photos and papers as a way of um, thematically structuring the book. And so the book is structured very differently from when I first put it together. But I always liked having those papers and documents and photographs in the text. And I like how they broke up the material, but also told their own story. One of the hardest chapters in the book for me to write, or two chapters, I think, is The Man in the Mountain and Unspeakable Sadness, or those two chapters. And the photographs, my father has metal cases full of slides from my childhood, and I hadn't seen them since I was a child. And he gave them to me when I was working on the memoir. And, those photographs alone told a story. And then my reaction to those photographs and seeing them for the first time also told their own story. It gave me information that I didn't have before. And it forced me to contend with the reality of what had happened to me when I looked at photos of myself aging through time. And I had to, there's a way that maybe a lot of us do this, is like we tell ourselves that whatever we went through wasn't that bad. And then you look at kinds of evidences that may, tell a different story. And I think it was important for me to have other kinds of evidence in my memoir besides just my testimony, my witness, and my observations, but also to hear maybe counter narratives even. My parents always told a story that we had come to this country when I was 3. And then when I did a FOIA request on myself and got immigration documents, it turns out, no, it was actually a very different year. It wasn't winter, it was the summer. So, their distinct memory about when we came to this country is actually different from what the paperwork says, which I think is fascinating.
It really is. And I think it adds another layer of fascination to your book to include all those documents and photos. So, speaking about your family, I know that you changed some names of living family members in the book, but I'm also curious how the living family members reacted to some of the things that you included in your memoir and how
Thank
you
you.
responded to their response.
I mean, I have been watching my friends who published memoirs for many years now, and every family is different. But I wanted to try to set the relationship up and set expectations about my memoir up with my family, especially my immediate family, so that I could try to give myself and my book the best chance, so that people in my family would understand what the document is or what the book is. Like, it is my version of events. It is the truth as much as I can try to figure out what that is. They, I'm sure, would tell a slightly different story, and they have their own stories, and that's fine. And that is their story, but this is my story from my perspective. So I tried to set those expectations up, and I included them in the process, and I asked them, what do you want your name to be if I don't use your real name? And so, I did my best to let my family know that I valued them, and but I also was going to go ahead and write whatever I needed to write and publish in the book. And they've been great. I mean, it's been really touching for me to have conversations with my parents and siblings about, what I mean, the things that I write about in the book, like Celeste is right, I don't talk about them. So it's not like we've had open conversations about some of the things that happened to me. And so it was for the first time my family heard exactly my experience and my thoughts and my feelings. And so we talked about that, and they were very respectful, and some of them were apologetic, and really had a lot of compassion for what I went through. And that was very touching, and it was an opportunity for healing. And it's been inspiring for me to see how the next generation, my nieces and nephews and Nibbling, how they've been so proud of my book, and how they talk about it, how they share my book with their teachers and other people. It's like really incredible to have them be proud of me, and to, like, if they see my book in a bookstore, they'll like pose next to it and take a picture, and they'll want to send it to me. So it's just like, I never even saw a book by a Filipino. I don't even know, like, it took me so long to even see one, but to see one on a bookshelf and to have them see, like, even if they don't want to become writers, and I don't think many of them do, they've seen me try to sort of struggle with this dream I've had of publishing a book, and they see that I've done it. And I hope for them and my students and other people that it inspires them, and makes them think that, if there's something that they really want to go for, there are ways to try to make that happen for themselves.
Well, that's really great. Your family was so supportive, and the younger generations are so proud. That's fantastic. So, your memoir won the Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing, and along with Celeste Ng, you've gotten so much praise from so many different authors and review publications. So, how did you feel when you won and you started getting all this positive feedback outside of your family?
Thank you. I don't know that anyone's asked me that question, and so I really appreciate it. I think I was really I mean, it's a wonderful thing, but I think what happens to me is there's disbelief. It's like it's I mean, you had mentioned earlier that I won the Massachusetts State Book Award in nonfiction. Like, I still am processing that, even though we had a reading with the Concord Book Festival a couple months ago, and I mean, I know that that's true, and yet it's hard for me to I guess reconcile it or take it in, because my expectations are so off from that. I mean, I think, like, a lot of my lived experience, whether it jives with reality or not, is of sort of being on the margins of things, and being on the side, and being invisible and ignored, and so it is like, very unusual for me to be in the center of things, and it's wonderful, and I just never imagined it. And I have to work at being able to take in the wonderful feedback and compliments, because I respect it. I mean, I know what it's like for me to take the risk and tell somebody what their writing has meant to me. So I very much respect when I hear that from other people. But I also want to take it in more and appreciate it. And it's, I don't know if it's like a way that I in particular have been socialized, or it's cultural, or it's gendered, who knows, or it's because of my trauma history, I don't know. But I'm happy for it, and it's sort of astounds me every time it happens.
Well, it's definitely deserved. So
Oh, thank
that's
you.
amazing. Continuing with with positive feedback you've received, just this past summer, the Boston Book Festival chose your short story, "The Book of Life and Death," as its one city, one story selection. And they said that they believed it was a story that would resonate with Boston residents. So, from what I understand, you wrote the story before COVID, but then you brought it back and added some elements of the virus to it. So, what inspired you to choose that particular story? And what was it like getting good news while we're all like hunkered down in our homes over the summer?
Oh, it was wonderful. I'll start there with like getting that news. It came in email, which most news does these days. It doesn't, it's actually not the phone call of like, decades past, but an email. And I'm used to getting rejection emails all the time. So when I get an email from like a literary organization or someplace that I've sent work to, it really doesn't phase me that much. I just open it up and I just expect them to say like, thank you, but sorry. And I had to read this one from the Boston Book Festival a couple of times because again, I was very surprised. And I didn't say anything to anybody. I mean, most of us are not with lots of people, but I live in my apartment with my husband, and I went for a walk. I didn't even tell him. I said I'm taking a walk, and so I took a walk, and I like checked my phone again at some point during the walk, and the email was still there. And I tried to really enjoy it for that hour or so that I was taking a walk and just sit with it. And you know um because it really did mean so much to me. Like, I've been reading One City One Story booklets since the very first one, and I would always look forward to it, and I'd always try to get like a bunch and hand them out to my students because they're gifts, these like beautifully printed, high quality short stories. And people don't necessarily read short stories in the ways that we have in generations past. And so I hoped that by giving these books to them, they would feel you know, like they would appreciate a short story and want to seek out more of them. So it was incredible, and wonderful to get that news.
I imagine. Well, if you've enjoyed this talk with Grace as much as I have, make sure to register and go to her book talk, which is on the 19th. It's a Saturday, and it's from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. She's going to be talking all about her book, The Body Papers. We hope to see you there. Thanks again, Grace. It was great talking with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Devin. I really appreciate it. Take care.
You too.